Hello and welcome to the Be Unmessable with podcast. I'm your host, Josselyne Herman-Saccio, and I am so excited to have my guest today, Dr. Sundra Ryce Hardy. First of all, she's brilliant and she's gorgeous, and she's an organizational leadership consultant. She has been a strategist, a thought leader, a motivational speaker. She has like almost 30 years of corporate leadership experience, although you couldn't tell it by looking at her. And she's got a lot of experience working with Fortune 100 companies and family businesses all around the world. She's a specialist in organizational transformation, leadership, well being, and get this, the construction management business, which is like a whole other thing, right? But what I love about what Dr. Sundra does is she provides vision and strategy and corporate leadership to organizations, to executives around the world. And we met in a side of our mutual commitment to support leaders in not being at the effect of burnout. So one of the questions that, Sundra always asks is who takes care of the leaders? And I love speaking to her. I love working with her. And I'm so happy, Dr. Sundra, that you agreed to be here today. And I'm just so excited to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely. I always love doing a great podcast with the Be Unmessable with Queen. Of course, glad to be here.
Yeah, great. And is there anything you want to just tell us about your journey and how you ended up with your doctorate? I mean, doctor, I feel like so humbled. I'm like, Dr. Sundra, it's like, because, you didn't start out with that idea, right? So what would you like to share with us about how you ended up doing what you're doing?
Absolutely. So you talked about a little bit about my journey, and so how did I get to construction and now like leadership development, organizational leadership, etc. So I started out actually in construction. Grew up in a family-owned business. My dad was a contractor, mechanical contractor, and I always wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps. And saw the hard work he did. Building his business over the years. When I was young, probably like 8, 9, 10 years old. So I always said I want to go into business with my dad. So when I became of age, well, I started working for my dad. I would say that in mechanical business, and my dad did very well. He was an amazing contractor in my hometown, the city of Buffalo, New York.
Mm,
And
New
uh,
York's in the house. That's what I
yes,
say to
yes,
that.
yes. Just in case anybody's out there from Buffalo, I rarely meet people, but just in
Because
case.
they're frozen. That's why you don't
Yeah,
meet
they're
them, because they
frozen.
are
They're frozen
frozen
on
as
Lake
ice.
Erie.
Yes.
So, started working for my dad when I was about 13. And then once I finished college, I wanted to go into business with my dad. And he said, no, there's so many opportunities for women owned businesses and also minority owned contractors at this time. It was almost like, that was probably like 29, 30 years ago. And so he said, you have to start your own business.
Mm,
So I say he kind of pushed me, he and my mom pushed me out of the proverbial nest.
good for
So
them.
I started my own company in 1996, started my own company, and I started out as a mechanical contractor, a small, tiny mechanical contractor in my dad's footsteps. And about 3 years later, I diversified into general contracting, general construction. And then also about 3 years after that, construction management. So I just began to get a lot of notoriety being a woman in construction. I had a lot of great projects. And then over the course of my career, we've done about 500 million in sales in
It's
my company, in
insane.
that company. So we'll put a pin in that because we'll go back to that about being unmessable with and some things that happen, because I think it's important to know that life happens, people get burned
Yes.
out, things change. And so, as I started growing in the business, I once became the burned out leader. And just imagine having family and having all those important, I say, glass balls to juggle, and just being in business, being a woman in business, being young, because I was very
Hmm.
young as well. I'm still young, but I was
Yes,
very young at
exactly.
that time, and just learning and experiencing. So I had an opportunity after I did a sabbatical in my business, and we can talk about that if we have time. Or on the next, that's probably another
Well, we're
entirely
going to have
different show.
multiple episodes, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's an entirely different show. But I had an opportunity to go back to school and to get my doctorate. And when I went back, I really focused on self care for leaders, because I was
Mm,
doing a lot of speaking. I was doing a lot of engagements around that and seeing leaders and meeting leaders who were burned out and who were struggling. And this was before COVID. So, I went back, got my doctorate in organizational leadership, and I really focused on the premise of my work, like you said, is self care for leaders. Who takes care of the leader that takes care of everybody else? So it was birthed from my story and from my
Yeah.
journey as a leader, being burned out, running a multi-million-dollar business with a family, with parents, with, being in the society, because I had all those responsibilities as well.
And
The social life
demands on
aspect.
you,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest things that messes with people in the work that I do with people is burnout, because people are trying to do it all, thinking that's what it looks like to have it all. And having it all and doing it all are two different universes. And when you try and do it all, you end up burnt out. So that's, originally how we met. But I
Yes.
love the work that you do with people because it's so important if you want to make an impact in the world, if you want to make an impact in your company, in your community, in your family, you don't have to be the leader of a country to be a leader. You could be the leader of your family. It is so critical to have self care built into your routine.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're, like you said, we're all leaders, and whatever we have to steward over, like you said, whether it's family, whether it's a business, whether it's, a corporate job, or wherever you land, you are a leader, even in your own life. And, you
Yes.
talk about that being unmessable with, to me, is the quintessential leadership journey, because you're talking about, number one, yourself. How do I design a life or create a life in which I am unmessable with? That means I'm a leader here. Like, I lead this charge. I'm in charge. I'm responsible. And I'm taking the courage to do the things that I need to do to be unmessable with.
And how do you stay in that space? I like what you're saying because it's not about your circumstances or what's coming at you. It's being able to shift from reacting to what's happening to being the creator of your plan, of your vision, of your dream, and then executing that plan versus just dealing with what life's throwing at you and reacting to it. And most leaders are good reactors because they have to be. They have to put out fires, they have to do, but that's different than creating. So talk a little bit about creation because I know that's something that you really are, you've developed in yourself and ongoingly developed because this is a mountain with no top, but it's something that's
Right.
important to you in your journey. Talk about creation and what that is to you.
Yeah, I think it's so important to create. Now, as I was telling you earlier before we got on the podcast today, I mean, that's one of the, I think, the biggest takeaways, and knowing you, working with you, and how you've impacted my creation and how I create things. And I think, I've always, you're right. We, as leaders, we have the ability to put out fires. We have the ability to pivot. We can make things happen. However, it is the world of reaction. And I think, when we started working together and doing things together, I started realizing where I am today in my leadership, that I was in a world of reaction. And so now, I really make it a practice, even in my self care and my well being practice, to that mental health practice, psychological well-being, to make sure that I'm creating instead of reacting. So when I'm messed with, because we're all messed with, I am
Always.
messed
Yep.
with all the time, every day.
Yeah.
However, it's like we say, like you say, game on, game on. And now I'm looking at how and in what ways do I create from when I'm messed with, when I'm messed with, or when, something hits me or circumstances hit me, just like they hit all of us. Life
Yeah.
happens every day. And so now I'm really disciplining myself, even as a leader on this level of leadership, to, really see it, acknowledge it, and then say, okay, hey, it's that simple for me. What do I need to create right now? What is the vision? What is the big picture? So I'm very utilitarian in my decision making as a leader, which means I generally look at the bigger picture when I make decisions. I generally look at that when I make decisions. So now, adding this piece of being unmessable with creating, it's given me a brand new, broader platform to really continue to create the life that I would like to live, and also to share that with other leaders and other people.
And that's really the point. It's like, it's great if you have a great life or you live the life of your dreams, but what about the people around you? Because if you're one little bubble of oxygen and everybody else is, sucking the oxygen out of the room, that's not sustainable. That will produce burnout too.
Yeah.
being the only light in a dark room. So have lots of lights in the room. And that's what I love about your work. It's really to empower leaders to be
Yes.
able to fully express their vision and fulfill their vision without the burnout, with strategies for that. So if you look in your life, right, because you were saying, put a pin in it, what is an area or a situation you had to deal with that really messed with you, that could have sent you down for the count, but you somehow were able to transcend that situation or those circumstances and emerge from the ashes unmessable with?
Okay, I got something for you. Okay,
Okay, here we go.
it's
The
it's
game is
it's it's,
on. Here we go.
it's yeah, it's deep and it's good. And I want to talk about this because a lot of people, it's my truth, it's my story. And so I talked about the multi-million dollar business and the amazing business that I created and the huge team that I had and traveling around the country, traveling around the world as a business leader in construction, woman in construction, African American woman in construction. Wow. And then I told you I got burned out. So I got burned out. And then in 2019, I actually experienced bankruptcy
Mm,
within that company. And Josselyne, as a person having a business for 20 plus years and then having to make a decision about ending the company that I never thought I would have to end, that I always thought would go on for perpetuity. And this is just my life because it ended.
wow.
And we needed to end it because it was not going well. And I held on as long as I could. And I remember the day that I closed the business that I had. I'm smiling now. I wasn't smiling then. I was
I'm
being
sure
messed
at
with.
the time, yes, exactly. Being
I was
messable with
being
doesn't
messed
look
with.
like this. Yes.
It doesn't
This
look
is
like this. I'm
this is the
talking
other
about
side.
I'm talking about the other side.
Yeah.
So, but at the time that day, I remember the specific day in August of 2019 that I closed the business. It was a Friday. And it was just like one of the toughest decisions that I had to make. And it was a business decision. It was a decision to, move on. And there's a book by James Cloud that I tell every leader to get. And it's an amazing book, Dr. James Cloud, and it's called Necessary Endings.
Mm,
And, I put a lot of people around me because I believed in having great, mentors, counselors around you. And so, when we got ready to make the decision, it wasn't just a decision. It was like, I had some great people around me saying, okay, this is a necessary ending. And one of the premises of that particular book and his work is uh, being aware of what you have to end so that you can start a new beginning.
it's powerful.
And that's
It's
about creating,
powerful.
like you're saying, being
Yeah.
unmessable with. But we're such creatures of habit. And what I realized is I had held on to that business much too longer than I should have. When I looked back on it, there was a time where I could have let it go and it wouldn't have been the devastation, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does
But
make
I was
sense.
holding on because of, whatever, victimization. It could be what should have been. Remember the shoulds. This should be like this. But once I had to let it go, that back to that Friday in August of 2019, I remember letting it go. And I talked to my parents and it was like one of the hardest things. Like, I know that you guys helped me. I felt like I was letting everybody down. I was being messed with. But my parents said something very powerful to me. They were like, look what you've created and look how many families that you've blessed over the years. Look what you've done with your family and your life. And then my mom said something to me that I'll never forget. And I take this on my journey. And she said, you're not going to miss a beat. So she actually pushed me into being unmessable with it. My mom's actually a PhD. And I always followed in my dad's footsteps. But that was like the turning point where I said, now I'm going to follow in my mom's footsteps.
Wow, that's so great. Our mothers are, I mean, my mother is the
Yeah.
original OG unmessable with, so I get it.
My mother is the second original
Yeah,
OG after
yeah,
your mother.
exactly.
So she pushed me into that. And then, so that was a Friday. On a Sunday, I remember flying out to Dallas for a meeting. I was going for a meeting, a totally different thing. This is more so in the leadership capacity, because at this point I had just received a doctorate degree. I had done that while there was already another creation happening. So I had received that probably about a year before, and I was starting to do leadership work. And so I ended the business on a Friday, flew to Dallas. I take that back, on a Saturday for meetings that Sunday and Monday with a major corporation. And that day, that Sunday when I got there, and that Monday, I was on stage in the midst of being messed with, but on stage leading leaders in a whole different capacity. And then from there, that corporation said to me, hey, we want to hire you as a consultant to work with us, to work for our companies, to work for our team. And that just opened the
Ugh.
windows of heaven, I say, for me to create something new. And from that moment on, I never missed a beat.
It sounds like that old saying, one door closes and another one opens. But from my perspective, it's like when you complete something, like you did the necessary ending of your business, there's space
Yes.
for a new creation. And that's what you demonstrate and embody in that story. It's amazing.
Yes. So that's kind of the story of what was happening. And so so I created something new, and then it was the birthing of this whole new leadership development realm in which I'm such a stand for leaders. Working with them and helping them be unmessable with, and eliminating burnout, navigating disruption, and really innovating from that. And that's the creation part. And so
Yeah.
now I'm so blessed to be in this realm. I still do consulting on the construction side because then that opened back up once I like took my next rightful place. So I still do that, still do consulting on some great projects, but now I've created something that I really love. I got married during
Mm.
COVID, and that was something I wanted to do for a long time and didn't have a space, but then I had a space for it. And so my life is just in a creation now.
It's a killer place to be. It's so magical when you're in that space of creation. And so many people, especially highly successful people, they had that space when they first started their company or their project or whatever. And then what happens is that whole creation becomes something to manage. And now you're in management mode and you're having the thing you created survive. And like you said, being attached to the structure of it, or I call that being attached to the vehicle, not the vision. So being
Yes.
able to pivot from, some vehicles, there's a necessary ending, as you say, and now creating a new vehicle to fulfill your vision, which is, beautiful. It's a magic space.
Yeah, and like it's okay. And that's what I do and in my leadership work now, and whether it's, like I do a lot of work like for Pepperdine University. I lead a certificate program for them. I do retreats and different things for leaders. But one of the things that I really love to highlight is that it's okay to change that vehicle. Like that's what messed with me. Like for a long time, I didn't feel it was okay. I didn't know it was okay. And even though I was teaching at some level, but I personally I was struggling with that. I was really being messed with because my vehicle had to change, and this was the vehicle that I thought was going to be the ride or die. That was good, even though the wheels were falling off and it
Yes, and
was
you end
getting
up you're
rusty.
like, I get, because it doesn't just happen with companies, it happens with relationships, it happens
Yes,
with employees. People keep employees that are not working, that don't, aren't in the same game that they are. As an entrepreneur, I work a lot with entrepreneurs, and one of the things that messes with people a lot is being attached to something or someone. And as leaders or as human beings, we identify with certain things. So some people identify with their marriage, and then if their marriage ends, they don't know who they are, or they identify with their company or their career. And if that ends, it's like they're lost. So whatever you identify with has the power to mess with you, which is why I love when we create together, because one of the things I'm committed that people start to identify with is their word, because it's the only thing that is independent of everything else. Like you have 100% say over your word. So if you want to create whatever vision it is, that happens in your word. And if you identify with that vision, it's also malleable. It's your word. You're never stuck with anything.
right.
So you can create a new vehicle. Like you could stop doing what you're doing today and you could still fulfill that vision of empowering leaders in some other methodology, because you're not a thing, you're not fixed, you're not rigid. You are a function of whatever you're creating. I love it.
Yeah, and I think that's important. So I created a vision board for 2024. So I look at this, some I used to create vision boards and stuff, things like that, and prayer boards and things, but and I would like let them sit, and I would come back to it maybe sometime later, and I would say, "Oh, that happened, that happened, that
Yeah,
happened."
yeah.
But now I'm actually intentional. I like look at it's this big pink board. I have all kinds of things on it, and I look at it every day. And to your point, but when I look at it, it's the vision. It's okay, this is happening to me. And then I look at it for inspiration and say, okay, now what am I going to create from here? This is what I said that I want to create from my word. So what is it that I want to create? So I kind of look at that as a visual.
I love
And
it.
I just, keep looking at creating, because you're right. Our word is what formulates it and where we have to stand. And you're right about being attached, because one of my biggest takeaways from experiencing bankruptcy and going through that within a corporate sense, is that I felt like, I always said I was my business. Like I literally, Josselyne, thought I was my business. Like that was my biggest takeaway, where I realized like I am a person. I know that might
Yeah.
sound crazy to some of you.
No,
I don't
I
know.
get it completely. I
But I was like,
do.
I am a person. I am a woman. Like I got that. I'm like a person. I am a woman. I am not my business.
Yeah.
Like I literally, somewhere I was attached to that company. So I say God works in mysterious ways, because he's like, okay, let's do something else now, so you can get something else and get unattached.
Yeah, it's like new game. This is what my kids used to say, because like I've been training them in transformation since they were born, since I've been doing it since I was 11, and they would be arguing in the car or something, and then my middle child, Sage, would say, "Okay, everybody, new game. Now we're nice to each other." And he'd
Yeah.
just be able to pivot the whole space of the car. It's like, that's right, new game. How's that old one working out for you? Not so good? Okay, let's create a new game. What are we up to now? So I love that
And that's
spirit.
leadership.
That
That's
is,
Sage's leadership. That is true leadership in action.
yeah,
Hey, let's create a new game. Let's just create a new game, because we
yeah.
can.
And you can do it anywhere. You can do
Yeah.
it in your marriage, you can do it in your business, you can do it with
Yes.
your well-being, your body, because most people, their tendency is to put themselves last.
Yes.
Right? And so they don't take care of themselves. They don't water the tree that's bearing the fruit, or fill the tank of the car that's going up the hill, or whatever analogy you want to use. And one of the things, out of working with you, out of meeting you, I have definitely been prioritizing my self-care a lot more since I met you, because I can see the impact on my ability to
Yeah.
fulfill my vision when I don't have gas in the tank.
Yes. Yes. I always
Yeah.
say, my motto that I've been talking about for 20 years, because I fly a whole lot, and I think I've said this to you before. I fly a lot, and so they always say every time you get on the airplane, put your mask on first before you help others. And really, that's because in actuality, we don't want to think about this, but if you don't, in 15 seconds, if it loses oxygen, you will lose oxygen. You'll be unconscious. So you can't
Yes.
help anybody else. You can't help your child or your neighbor if you don't have oxygen flowing to you. And I always think about that analogy for myself, just to protect my own self-care and my own boundaries. Like, let me make sure that I am taking care of myself first. And that means, as far as well-being, like you said, whether it's marriage, whether it's relationships, whether it's work, spiritual, in all those aspects. What's not serving me anymore? What is it that I need to be honest about? To what is it that I need to let go of that doesn't serve me? I was doing
Yeah.
a leadership session for some leaders at a retreat out of Michigan on Saturday, and I had a slide in my presentation called "Let It Go." And when I presented the slide, Josselyne, everybody was like, "Oh!" Like you can hear the air in the room, because there's so many things that we need to let go of. Just let
Yeah.
it go, and the sooner the better. The sooner we can discipline ourselves to let things go and start creating, the better.
Yeah, I have a like a term that I use is, you got to release to expand. You want to
Yes,
expand your business, you got to release some of the things you're doing, because you're not going to be able to keep, doing what you're doing if you want to get to a bigger level. So what can you let go of? What can you release? And I think that's great in breath too. As I started to do
yes,
yoga in the last year or so, it's like every time you release, you're expanding, and it's counterintuitive.
yes.
It's like people want to
It
build
is.
their business, get more stuff, da da da. No, no, no. Let go, just like you did
Mhm.
in on that Friday afternoon. Let go, you create a space, and magic can happen.
Yes,
Yeah, it's
you open
beautiful.
yourself
So
up to that. Yeah,
totally. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, if there's no space, if you're a filled up canvas, how's anybody going to create a masterpiece?
That's right.
Not possible. So let me ask you, is there something you can give our listeners, like tips or actions or practices that they could start implementing today to be able to avoid burnout or fulfill their potential as a leader? Anything that you can offer?
Yeah, there are a lot of things that we can do. And that number one is, as we've been talking about, take care of yourself first. That's even in the Bible. Love your neighbor as you do yourself. So if you don't love yourself, how can you love your neighbor? So
Mm,
I would say really start looking at the practice of self-care. Like, how do I really care for myself? And four different areas: mentally, physically, emotionally, and mentally. How do I take care of myself in those areas? And how do I create something powerful in each of those areas? Because each of those areas can mess with us. Physical, with eating properly, different things like that,
sleeping.
exercising,
Yeah.
sleeping, all those things that we need to sustain then we go into the mental health, how do we create health and wellness in that area? How do we say no? I have mental health days. I don't have enough of them, but mental health days where we stop and we say, let my brain rest so that I can create. Because another thing that's counterintuitive that my mentor, Dan Sullivan, taught me from Strategic Coach some years ago was have a free day. And a free day
Yeah.
is like a 24-hour period where you're doing, like, for example, no business, no business books, no business newspapers, anything like that. Now, it's really difficult when you're a workaholic and type A and B to do that. However, when you learn to do something like that, for an example, and you have to train people in your life and around that too, because people expect you to be all things to all people. But when you do things like that, you give your brain, your mind, mental health a chance to rest,
Hmm.
because we go so much. And then once you give yourself a chance to rest, what I've learned is that creativity level just pivots, because you then really create a space when you stop, Josselyne, when you really
Yeah.
physically stop mentally. So that's a practice, and that's a sometimes a challenging practice, but you can create. You can create from that.
But even if you can't, like, for those of you listening, if you can't find a whole day, right? Just take a period of time. Like, I started putting in recharge time in my calendar, a half an hour every afternoon, because I'm going from
Yes.
7 a.m. on calls, and I'm like, okay, so I need to recharge, just like my phone needs to recharge. Why wouldn't I
Yes.
have to recharge? So whatever that looks like for me, it could be I go take a walk, I go get a cup of coffee, I lay in bed and watch the news, which I don't know how that recharges me, but given what's going on the news, but for some reason it numbs
It
my
does.
brain, you know?
Right.
Yeah, it has me stop thinking, like you said, and just be and recharge. And I love to be able to take the weekends. I mean, I worked for 30 years where I was working on weekends and days and
Yeah.
never had a day off. And now that I've been able to design my schedule to have the weekends off, when I'm with my parents, I don't have to be on calls every hour. I can
Yeah.
actually be with them. It's a very different, like, your nervous system goes
Yes.
into a different space, which from a physical well-being and mental well-being and spiritual well-being and all
Yes.
of that, it makes such a difference. So I think that's so important. And
Yeah.
if those of you listening walk away with one thing today, self-care. Self-care, recharge, take care of yourself, because the oxygen is going away. You need to make sure you
Mhm.
have it to give other people the oxygen. I love that.
Yeah. And put gas in your tank. All of us who
Yes.
drive cars, like, you can only go so far. That car will stop on you if you don't put gas in it. So let's think of ourselves that way. Let's make sure we recharge, give ourselves oxygen, put gas in that tank.
Drink water,
Drink
eat your
drink
food.
water. Eat.
People forget to eat.
To eat.
Stop
People
doing
forget
that.
to eat. People
I
forget
know.
to eat. Make sure you take care. I would say that's what I want the takeaway to be today. Take care of yourself. I mean, it's
Yeah.
that simple, but also that important and that crucial. Take
Yeah.
care of yourself, because as you take care of yourself, then you will be able to take care of other people. You will be able to do what you are called to do effectively and more
Yeah.
effectively as you take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And then is there anything I can support you in? Anything that you're experiencing, your vision isn't moving as fast as you want it to, or you're being messable with in any area? I am at your service.
Okay, everybody. I love an opportunity for Josselyne to coach me. So we're going to witness this. I'm not saying no. I will never say no to her for coaching.
Well, it's an invitation. You could say no, and it's
Well, I
fine. I would
could.
not take it personally. It's
I
whatever
could
will
say no,
support
but
you.
I'm creating something amazing, so I'm not going to say no.
Okay, good. So tell me how can I support you?
So for me, and as a leader where I am, because now my life is getting busier, 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 full, 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 and it's
Yeah.
great. It's amazing. I love it. However, boundaries are I'm seeing that I need to build my practice and my creativity around boundaries, because I still always, I want to maintain this creativity, this space where, well, I said this some years ago. Tim Ferriss has a book called The 4 Hour Work Week.
Yep.
And I always said, oh, I'm going to create that. I said that years ago, but it actually happened where I did create the 4 hour work week. And that doesn't mean, of course, every work week I'm working 4 hours, but
Right.
the concept, and I'm not telling everybody to read that book, but it's the concept.
It's a good
So
book.
I want to protect my concept, my 4 hour work week concept. I want to protect that as I'm growing, as I'm giving to leaders, as I'm traveling more, as I'm doing that. So yeah, that's what
Well,
I want to do.
what is messing with that? So that's my first question is I got the vision, but what is it that stops you from being able to quote unquote protect that? I'm going to call it more like stay true to the design of that versus protect it.
Stay
Because
true to
protecting,
design.
yeah, it's more of a reaction versus you've designed something. So how do you stay true to that versus get sucked into whatever you're getting sucked into? So what is it that's sucking you, so to speak?
What's sucking me is, honestly, there are some things that I don't want to do. There's some things that are other people's business, I would say, like that, or other people's things or events that they want to include me on, but I don't always have the time. But other people seem to think I'm obligated to do some things that they want me to do, if that makes sense. Other
So
people, corporations, different things. So there are things that show up that I need to say no to, and that's messing with me. Does that make sense?
so
Like, I
what
need
yeah,
to be
so
able to
what
say no.
has you not say no? I'm assuming you're saying yes to things that you should be saying no to. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Okay.
at some point, and
So,
that's taking my time. That's taking the time away from my design.
okay, but now here's where it comes into being true to your word, right? So if you have a design, do you have a parameter of this is the time I don't do things in and this is the time I do and from this time to this time on this day I don't book things, or do you have anything like that you've created?
No.
Then that's what's missing. So, and I can speak from personal experience. Last year, I looked at, okay, what do I want my life to look like at the end of 2024? And I went from a blank canvas. I said, okay, I want to only be working on this day, this day, this day. That's it. 3 days a week. That's the only time I'm booking coaching calls. That's it. Now, that was like Herculean for me to say no to people. They're like, well, I see your Calendly link, but there's no times on Mondays and Fridays. I'm like, that's right. I don't do coaching on Mondays. And I had to just keep saying it, even though it felt like a lie. It felt like I was going to cave at any moment. Well, what if they have an emergency? What if No, you just have to make it a deal breaker. Like, you're not going to go cheat on your husband. Do I have to worry about you cheating on your husband?
No.
No. So now you got to have whatever those days are or those hours or
Yeah.
periods be like that. Like, you wouldn't violate your trust with yourself. Because, the problem is when you give your word to yourself, it's easy to break it. When you
Yes.
give your word to somebody else, it's less likely you're going to break it. So, unless you have those sacred time periods, you're going to keep messing with your word.
I love that. Yeah, that's it. That's good. That's really good.
Yeah. So, get it clear because I did that. And it's interesting because, I would never have had the space to even do this podcast because this is a new vision for me to be able to fulfill on this vision if I didn't take Mondays and Fridays off, because now that's when I do my recordings for the podcast.
Wow.
So, but I wouldn't have had time because I just
Right.
back to back, back to back. I'm lucky if I have an apple, unless I
Right.
design it in the beginning of the day and have it sitting there. So that's all that's missing is you
I love
actually
that.
consciously painting the picture and then honoring your painting.
I love that. Thank you. I
Yeah,
love
my
it.
pleasure. My pleasure. Let me know if you run into any obstacles and I'll support you through them, of course. As always, I'm yours
Thank you.
forever,
Thank
you
you.
know.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you so, so much for being here. Where can people find you and learn more about what you do and maybe even work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I do coaching, speaking, and I do a lot of coaching with leaders in their organization. So I love that, consulting. And also, you can see anything that I'm up to on my website, www.drsundra.com, DRSUNDRA.com. You
And
can
we will
find me
have
there.
the
And
link in the
yes,
show notes. We'll
have the
definitely
link.
have links
Yeah.
to everything.
Yeah, you can find me on social media, Dr. Sundra Ryce Hardy. But my website is a great place to go and get information and find out what we're doing and the leadership retreats and wonderful things that we're doing with leaders around the country and around the world.
Yeah. They have retreats all over the place from, in Europe. We might even be doing one together.
Yes,
We
yes,
hope
we are.
in
No,
Switzerland or
we're
something.
going to. We are creating that. Come on, we're
Come
creating it.
on. Game on.
Game
Like
on.
making a difference in
Game
Europe.
on.
We love it.
Switzerland, Europe, Paris. Yes, so let's game on.
I'm in. I'm in. You had me at hello.
Yes,
Okay. All right. And thank you so, so much again for your
you're welcome.
time, for your commitment to people, and for the difference that you make and you will continue to make. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Keep being unmessable with. I'm going to
Yeah,
do the same.
you too. Exactly. Thank you again for joining us in this episode of Be Unmessable with the podcast. And I never take for granted that you spend some time with me during your day. And I always want to make sure that you walk away with value. So if you are somebody who has ever dealt with burnout or overwhelm, I have a gift for you. If you click below in the show notes, you can get this 1 hour free workshop led by myself and Dr. Sundra Hardy, who is a specialist on burnout, and you can get some strategies for dealing with burnout and overwhelm and disappearing both of them. So take advantage of this gift and let me know what you discover out of participating in it. Thanks again.